and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we are taking a look at the new Empire Order of Battle, which is version 3.02, which was recently updated and brought the Empire in line with some of the earlier released ORBATs in terms of very flexible fleet selection. Now, overall, the rules have remained quite stable throughout these new ORBAT updates, but the Empire did see quite a few little tweaks to their main weapon quality named Alchemical, and they also saw a few tweaks on how they use their paddle wheels in this version. Now, let's start off with that alchemical quality. That one was tweaked a few times in the past, and in a few editions before this, a few versions before this I should say, alchemical really was a quality that if something was set on fire by having a hazard token, it would constantly burn down as you applied more damage, and it was a bit much. It literally just ate away hull points in a matter of seconds, and then it was tweaked to a version that was sort of stacking on the disorder tokens but not really doing any additional damage, which to me felt a bit flat. And what we now have is a version that is somewhere in between, that I think is going to be quite fun to interact with. What does it do now? Well, actions with this quality that result in a number of exploding hits results equal or greater than the mass of the receiving target. So in other words, you really do want to score lots of crits to see this trigger, will receive a disorder condition. That's not necessarily the nastiest thing in it. If you have the necessary number of explosive hits, though, and the target is either crippled or already has a level of disorder before this action is resolved, then in addition to receiving the disorder condition, it's also going to suffer a critical damage roll. So the playstyle of this Empire force is really going to be sort of starting the fire, a bit of kindling if you will, by giving something a hazard token and then just piling it on with all different types of alchemical weapons to start stacking up the crits. And you have to remember there is a rule called Mark of Yama later down the line that gives all of your gunnery quality weapons pretty much the alchemical rule as well, provided that the initial target has one or more critical damage markers. So I think you're going to get this sort of staggered results in how you resolve your shooting as an Empire. So you start off by hitting it with a single disorder token, preferably with a weapon with the hazardous quality, and the Empire has loads of those, and then hitting them with alchemical rockets or other weapons with the alchemical rule to start fishing for those critical hits, and then finishing them off in closing range or below with your gun batteries that will now also get the alchemical quality to really start piling on the damage that way. And I think that's an interesting playstyle. And besides the alchemical changes, there has been a small change to how the paddle wheels work. You can of course still do the contra-rotation move by which you are able to turn up to 90 degrees, but it is now not allowed if it's making an other action requiring the paddle wheel traits. And there's been a new one called Tidal Surge. This one also requires you to have paddle wheels, that's mostly the Chinese ships in this case, unless it has a navigation lock or a critical damage marker or is making another action requiring the paddle wheel traits. So you're either using it for that turn or for this tidal surge. However, if you're making the tidal surge, your model pretty much makes a drift value backwards, so it goes back and reduces its speed attributes to 0, so you're only really drifting backwards. But when you're doing so, lots of fun things happen. You're going to be gaining +3 air defense value and SDV value for the duration of the round. So you're just kicking up a whole bunch of water, covering yourselves and giving you, more chances to not score hits with either submerged weapons or aerial weapons. On top of that, submerged units and surface units cannot be deployed within 5 inch of models making a tidal surge action in that round. So it also prevents, as a precaution, to block off some of those unexpected arrival rules that we find in the game these days. So it's sort of an anti-deep strike ability, if you will. On top of that, any submerged units within 5 inch of a unit with one or more models making a tidal surge action immediately suffer a level of disorder, so you can actually start piling on those disorders on submerged targets, and that's a big one because, well, the first level of disorder is that hazard token that is going to be the first step to trigger any alchemical attacks, although this is only used on submerged ships and you might not be firing at full capability when you do so. I think all of these special rules put together make some incredibly fun interactions, and it's definitely going to set apart some competent Empire players from the ones still having to find their sort of their specific niche and their playstyle, because yeah, if you stack on all of these different conditions in the correct order, you can really go to town on the opposing force. Apart from these tweaks made to the different universal special rules for the Empire, we also see the tweaks from the battle fleets following the new format that I discussed in a recent video for both the Crown and the Imperium. And if you're interested to see what happens to all of the other factions as well, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for any future updates along those lines. Now, these are the common restrictions found in the rulebook. Normally, you're not allowed to take more than one of any specific unit, unless of course your battle fleet dictates otherwise. You're only ever allowed to use one flagship, again unless the battle fleet specifies. And any units forming attached rules have to be within the same battle fleets as well. You can only have one flagship with the aerial trait, and flagship, one normal ship with the in addition to the flagship, I should say, you can only have one unit with the aerial unit trait. So imagine if you take a flagship that is aerial, well, you can take one other aerial unit on top of that. Same goes for the submerged units. Barring your flagship, you can only have one of those units. And when it comes to the battle fleet bonuses, you get some generic ones found in different ORBATs so far, but also some unique ones. The unique one for the Empire is the Cloud Strike, where they sent in some Korean fighter pilots in both the second round and the fourth round of the encounter for each battle fleet that has this rule. To execute such a Cloud Strike, the Empire player creates a stack of SRS token, and you can create one token for each unit in the battle fleet that has this bonus, that is still in the play area at the start of the round. So imagine that you've got a battle fleet with this bonus and it has 5 units, but one of them is destroyed by the second round. Well, you're only going to create a stack of 4 tokens then. Now, these SRS can be used exactly as though they've been launched by a unit in the battle fleet, allowing them to be placed against targets in the play area within 40 inch of any of the units in the battle fleet that has this rule. So all SRS tokens in the Cloud Strike are discarded at the end of the second and fourth round, which is what you would expect them to do. Command Override is one that we find in many different ORBATs, so that's the classical reroll as it was before. There's a new one called Strategic Reserves, and that allows all units in the battle fleet to be held in reserve. Not just allows it, it must be held in reserve. And when you roll for deployment from reserve, unit in the battle fleet may cancel the action dice result and instead treat the result as a heavy hit. And as a quick rules reminder, that means that you can never come onto the board automatically in turn 1, but you can still roll for it, and if you get lucky with your exploding hit, it still comes into reserves as you would normally. If you don't roll a result that allows them to come onto the board though in the second round, you're always allowed to treat it as if you've rolled a heavy hit, and as a rules reminder, that allows you to come in from the sides of the board but not from the opposing side's board edge, meaning from the opponent's edge. And the new one is also Valorous Conduct, that is found in a few of the ORBATs, but this means that 1 per round per battle fleet with this rule, a unit in this force, so that's the whole fleet in its totality, may replace the initiative value of a card being used for a Valor effect with an initiative value of 50, making that particular effect a lot harder to counter than before. So that pretty much is a bit of a soft counter to the Fortunes of War units that are quite prevalent in the game now. When we're looking at the different Empire battle fleets, the first one is of course the generic battle fleet that gives you, well, not that many extra additional bonuses, although for the Empire there's a quite unique one. You can actually take Cheetah Escort tokens for 10 points per token, even if you're not allowed to do so normally. In practice, this is usually the Chinese flagships who do not get access to the Japanese Cheetah Escort tokens, but if you're taking a generic Empire faction battle fleet, you can. They do work together nicely. And if it is the second battle fleet included in your force, then it may take the Strategic Reserves battle fleet bonus. This is a may. You do not have to use it if you don't want to use everything in reserves. It's just an option. And other than that, it's mostly the things you come to expect. One flagship, one surface unit is a must. That also means that all flagship fleets are gone from the game for the Empire. Which is, well, if you liked that before, it's a bit sad, but I don't really mind. I never really made a force with only flagships. You can only have one submerged unit, one skimming unit, and one cloud, aerial unit. I don't think there's any skimming units yet in this force, but I might be mistaken. If we do, I'll be sure to correct myself. There's also still the option to include an Empire Draconic Colossus battle fleet, where you take one flagship unit of Tianlong class. There's no need to have it a unit of 3 anymore, although I do think it's ill-advised to take just a single Tianlong and slap a flagship trait on that one, because you do have to remember your opponent scores victory points if he takes them out, and taking out a Tianlong isn't exactly the most difficult thing to do compared to most other flagships. So if you're taking them as a flagship option, the 3 unit is still advisable, or at least the 2 unit, or a unit of 2 strong. Then you must include another one, and you may include another 2 aerial units, and these have to be Tianlong class. So you do have to have multiple Tianlong units to create this Colossus battle fleet, and you can have a further 3 surface units, although those have to be the Gong class, which are the destroyers that come into this box. So you can field that unit pretty much as an Empire Draconic Colossus battle fleet by putting 2 of them as the flagship unit, 1 of them as the mandatory one, and then another unit with gongs, and then you have a nice little battle fleet like that in your total fleet. The Empire has access to 2 different frontline battle fleets. The first one being the Chinese, and if you're opting for a Chinese frontline battle fleet, you can have the flagship either be a Ninjing or Yangte, which is the box that we have, but there's also 2 ones that have yet to be released, which is the Ergon class and the Hailong class, which will be with us soon, I presume. The surface units that you have to take at least 1 of have to then be Chinese, with the Chinese trait. And you can use multiple Jiang class, Gong class and Shanghai class units should you so desire. Although I have to say, with a maximum of 3 surface units, spamming them a lot is maybe not exactly the easiest thing to do. You also get to include up to 2 aerial units with the Chinese trait, and the good news is, it's a bit of a spoiler for what's coming up, there will be quite a few different aerial Chinese units mentioned as well. The Japanese also get a frontline battle fleet, but it's quite different. The Chinese one we just discussed had the command override battle fleet bonus, while the Japanese allow you to do that cloud strike, creating SRS tokens in the 2nd and 4th battle round. Now there's a new flagship entry in it that we'll discuss when we get there, which is the Akita class, which comes with this very cool little laser cannon on it. But you can also use the tried and tested Congo class battleship to go with it as well. You have to then include at least 1 surface unit, and you may include a further 3 of those. Of course, those surface units have to have the Japanese trait. The one that you're able or allowed to spam, if you will, is the Osaka class, and you can also have multiple Kyoto classes in there as well. Submerged. There's a bunch of submerged units that we've seen since the previous version, and yeah, they've been refined a bit. They have to be with the Japanese, or have to have the Japanese trait, I should say. And the good news is you can also include at least one aerial unit. It needs to have the Japanese trait to go with it as well. Now that means that you can use your Tianlongs if you want to, but later down the line we'll see that some of the Sky Fortresses can actually be given a Japanese trait if you include a Bushido, I think it is. This is a type of upgraded weapon where you have got a bunch of airborne samurai on your ship to rain down terror onto the enemy. And so you can do that and still include it in the frontline battle fleet if you want to. There is no Chinese support battle fleet yet, not that we know of, but the Japanese support battle fleet will be with us soon. Now, if you want to field that one, there is going to be the upcoming Hachiman class, which launches this weird type of unique, sort of SRS token, but not really, or the Matsumoto class trait ship as well. Don't quite know what that one is. I'm not sure if it was in this ORBAT already. The cool thing about this though, the mandatory unit that you have to have is a submerged unit for the support squads that of course have to have the Japanese trait to go with it. You have to include one, and you can include a further 2. So no doubt when this Japanese support battle fleet with the Hachiman comes out, that's when we'll see all of these cool Japanese submarines coming up. And you can then still include a further 2 surface units, normal ships, if as long as they have the Japanese trait to go with it as well. And sort of the weird thing about it is the support battle fleet this time that gives you the valorous conduct rule, which is sort of the exact opposite of what most other factions have as well, which is what makes the Empire quite unique. When it comes to the outfitting yard for the Empire, we also see quite a few different changes. The first one being that Japanese dojo I mentioned, which is the Bushi Ryu Dojo, that word I couldn't quite catch the last time, gives you a +5 to the fray attribute, which is a step up from what it used to do, and on top of that, while making or defending from an assault, such a model may re-roll blank dice results, so it always has this sort of elite fighting crew on board, making your ships more specialized in the assault. The Cheetah Escort token now is treated pretty much like any other escort token. However, when you suffer a catastrophic explosion, normally you would lose an escort token. It will only remove a Cheetah Escort token if the attack has the submerged quality, so you're extra protected against incoming attacks. Do mind though that you still lose them if you get swarmed by weight of fire from SRS. And then there's a new weapon called the Corrosive Mortar. These weapons have no effect on submerged units, so you have to shoot at either surface, skimmer or aerial units. As a valor effect though, before the action dice for the attacker rolled, this weapon gains the alchemical quality, so you can give them alchemical as well. There's also this neat little tidbit that was mentioned on the Discord channel. Stuart McCannis, the game designer, said that this is actually a weapon part that you can place over any rocket batteries that are found usually molded onto the ships from the first generation. So you can actually upgrade them by sliding a part on top of your rockets already. So yeah, not sure if those will be glued down, but I'm quite looking forward to see what happens with them. Hokyangs were rules-wise not changed, although their weapon profile was tweaked quite a bit, nerfed, let's just not beat about the bush. It was reduced slightly in dice, but that kind of makes sense now that you can actually support with torrent weapons as well. That was quite strong. And one of the coolest entries is this new hyperbeam lens cannons that we can find on only one of the Japanese flagships, I think. A model armed with this weapon chooses an initial target in the shooting step, as you normally would, and then you draw a direct line between the initial target and this model. I'm presuming that's any part of the initial target. Resolve an attack against each model touched by the beam as a separate attack, which each of these models, but importantly, they are not the initial target for an attack, for rules like generators and everything, they're just caught in the blast, if you will. Roll the number of action dice indicated in the range band against each model touched by the line and consult the table below. Now, as a quick little forethought, I think it was 1 dice if you were shooting at point blank, 2 dice if you were shooting at closing, and 3 dice if you were shooting at long range. And if I'm not mistaken, this weapon has extreme range as well. So ironically, this one wants to hang back as far as humanly possible. Now imagine if you roll those 3 dice, right? You roll 3 dice, and you have to go and say what they do. The first one is, for a blank, there's no effect. For a counter, you gain a level of disorder, and that's the same for a heavy counter. If you've rolled a hit, the touched model suffers a critical hit. If you manage to score a double hit, the touched model suffers a catastrophic explosion. And if you manage to roll a catastrophic explosion on top of that, the player may apply this result of a further action die rolls for that range band. So, kind of weird to get, but not that difficult. You're at long range, you roll 3 dice, one of them is one of this exploding results, the other one is a hit, and let's say the other one is a blue one. Well, you can then go like, yes, I would like to choose this die, the exploding result, which causes a catastrophic explosion on the model, so 2 points of hull damage and a disorder level, and yep. Because I've rolled an exploding, or I chose this exploding result, I would also like to apply the hit result. So that's pretty much how you resolve it. The attacking player chooses which die result to apply. One of the action dice in the roll against the initial targets may always be counted as an exploding hit if one has not have been rolled. So you can always have 1 dice in the roll against the initial target, which is the one that you've actually chosen to be the target, as being an exploding hit. So that's pretty strong. You can just pick something on the board and just go like, yeah, you're taking a catastrophic hit, and anything caught in between the blast you're going to be rolling for, but that might actually hurt quite a bit as well. In terms of generators, there is really only one major change for the Empire, and that is the Great Wall generator. First off, this generator cannot be used against any ramming, assault, or attacks with the aerial, bomb, or submerged qualities. However, if they do work, Great Wall generators have a wall strength equal to the mass of the model they are mounted on, plus the armor of the target of the attack. If line of sight of an attack passes through one or more models with a Great Wall generator, then the initial target is considered to be protected by the wall strength of the Great Wall generator. So this helps if you're shooting over a target to something that lies behind it. Now, what does it actually do? Models in a unit where one or more models has a Great Wall generator are also considered to be protector, and if multiple protected, and if multiple Great Wall generators make a model protected, then you may choose which generator's wall strength to use. What is all of this about the wall strength though? If you want to cause a point of damage to that model, attacks against the protected model must cause a number of hits equal to or greater than the generator's wall strength, rather than equal to or greater than the armor value of the target. So scoring that initial point of damage is going to be way more difficult if you're shooting at models protected with a Great Wall generator. If the number of hits exceeds the generator's wall strength, then the generator has no more effect of the weapon and the target's armor value is used instead. They do give you an example of how this works though. For example, a protected model has an armor of 5 and the attack targeting that model, of course, passes through a model with a Great Wall generator on a Mass 2 model. This makes the target protected by the wall of strength of 7, because it has 5 armor of its own, and 2 because you get an additional 2 because it's mounted on a Mass 2 model. The attack needs to score at least 7 hits to cause any damage. If the attack caused 10 hits, double the armor of the target, it would take 2 points of damage as normal, as the generator is ignored. So this is one that pretty much protects you from opponents trying to hit you with multiple small attacks and trying to eat away at your hull points that way. It's a neat little addition. I do want to see how this pans out though, and yeah, maybe some Chinese players are able to make good use of that by blocking off some units and using them as more effective screens, especially on some of the cheaper cruisers that can now be found in the ORBAT. As far as their weapons goes, there weren't that many changes in there. There is the corrosive mortar, which I really like the look of, if I'm honest. I mean, with a support value of 3 and a lead value of 4, the support value of 3 is a quite high number for a small gun turret, so you're definitely going to be able to put it to good use. Also, when we're looking at the weapons qualities, it only has the hazardous ability and no aerial or submerged qualities, although you have to remember you can't target submerged ships with this one. But it means that there's no pesky ADV or SDV chipping away at your hits, and there's also no gunnery rule on this one, preventing you to roll exploding dice on mass 1 targets. So even though it's quite a basic weapon, I think it's a really strong addition to the Empire roster. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's mostly the heavy Kyang that saw a bit of a hit, and the regular Kyang. Bit less in terms of support dice if you're using the blade quality, and definitely a lot less if you're using it at a medium distance when using the blade profile. I still think you will want to field quite a few units that have access to heavy Kyang though, because this one has the hazardous quality, allowing you to provide that very important first hazard token to make sure that all of the rest of your alchemical weapons are going to trigger off of that one. And that's the same reason why the Kyang with the blade profile for the small version is still a reasonably solid option. Comes with that hazardous ability, although you're no longer firing that one at medium range, of course. And the big nerf to the small Kyang is that you're no longer getting to use the full torrent template. It's been downgraded to the small one, but again, I think that one was kind of needed now that torrent weapons can actually support each other, which they can do to great effect. It was not a nice thing to see that big template just ravage small units as well. And then of course the new entry was that hyper beam lens cannon. Like I said, it rolls 3 dice, allowing you to pick the different results at extreme range, so that really is a fun little weapon mechanic that they've introduced in this one. Now, onto the different flagships, and the first one is actually a new entry. It's a Mass 4 new ship called the Akita Super Battleship, and I'm guessing it is a variant of the Hachiman carrier as well. Kicks in at quite a substantial 332 points, but when you look at the weapon loadouts, you are getting a lot of cannon for your money, and you're also getting some really impressive defensive stats with armor 8 and citadel 17. I mean, this thing is not going to be taking a lot of catastrophic hits, I can tell you that. And with 11 hull points in battle ready and 5 in crippled, you're also not nuking this one down in a single turn. With up to 4 heavy gun batteries, and still an option to change that aft one should you so desire. Now, I've made a video on why I said that is not necessarily needed, although with this ship I would consider it, mostly because this one has of course heavy firepower, and you can only pick 3 weapons to use for the lead value anyway. I think this is a prime candidate to swap it out, but again, don't feel like you have to. You can have a very interesting side-firing profile with this one. It still has decent extra firepower with alchemical rockets aimed to the front. They're just small alchemical rockets, mind you, and you can upgrade them to these new corrosive mortars for plus 3 points. And it's one of those I would consider doing that, simply because it has the hazardous quality. It only needs to score a single point of damage, which is achievable with the 7 dice it would get if you're using this ship. Comes with heavy broadsides and heavy torpedo salvos as well, so yeah, it's a big boy. And You can take some extra Shita escort tokens as well, up to 4 of them for 10 points each, to crank up that really insane ADV and SDV value it has to make it a very tough one. You get some inspirational to boot, which is quite strong, and then a new entry that we've not seen before, which was the priority signals. And this one means that once per round, if the player with this battle ready unit, so it needs to be battle ready, has a valor effect cancelled in the play area, you may immediately attempt the valor effect again by using the initiative value of a new card. So if you're just chucking a low initiative value at your opponent to sort of bait him into countering it, you can still hit it with a high one afterwards, or try for 2 high ones if you wanted to anyway. So it's kind of another anti-Fortunes of War ability that we're now seeing as well. Although your opponent can still try and cancel it a second time if he's able to do so. So it's not a guaranteed way that your valor effects are coming through with priority signals, but it does increase the likelihood. And to add a bit of extra toughness to those already impressive defensive stats, you also get a free shield generator with that one as well. But like I said, you can change the aft gun to go for a shroud generator and have something that is really going to be a tough nut to crack for your opponent, with that shield generator mentioned here and the shroud generator. The Ergon entry hasn't really changed all that much. They did bump up the ADV stats quite by a bit, and it does have the new tidal surge ability, so if it wants to stay put, you can really get some ridiculously high ADV and SDV values if you so desire. It also comes with heavy gun batteries that you can replace with heavy alchemical rockets, and given how it has some additional smaller alchemical rockets as well, you might want to opt for that one, also to make the most of this alchemical conflagration rule that comes with it as well. If you don't feel like you want to upgrade the heavy gun batteries though, you can still opt for the new corrosive mortar option, and if I'm not mistaken, Stuart mentioned said that it would come in this set to begin with in the initial release. So yeah, that's the Ergon. The Hachiman assault carrier has also been bumped up to be mass 4 with a corresponding speed of 4, but does suffer a bit from the new hull point distribution that we're finding on carriers, meaning it favors crippled side as opposed to battle ready side, because you can more easily cripple carrier ships. It can also now swap out the rather measly weapons that it has, the 2 alchemical rockets, 2 corrosive mortars should it so desire. Although the big punching power comes from the fact that it now has 6 Rin exosubs in battle ready state, which are going to drop down to 3 if your opponent manages to cripple it. Exosubs attack with 5 action dice per token, so that's 30 of them being chucked out, and they can't really be intercepted, although your opponent will still get to use ADV and SDV against them, simply because they have either a aerial or submerged attack. At 280 points though, I can't really say that you'll be going wrong with this option. It is a very strong entry into the Empire ORBAT still. The Heilong Strike Battleship hasn't really changed all that much, gained the tidal surge and the option for corrosive mortars, so not a lot to say about that one. And the Congo Battleship did get a slight bump in its ADV, making it slightly more tough, and it actually gained focused gunnery as a rule, making the firepower that it does have slightly more attractive compared to what it was. Really good entry. I mean, it was solid before and it got even better. That's what we'd like to see. The Ninjing Battleship is your cheaper variant compared to the Congo, and is of course the one that will be leading the Chinese ones. Also benefiting from tidal surge now, but not really all that many changes except for a slight tweak to its air defense value to make sure that it's slightly better protected against SRS now. And its special version, the Caging, now standard comes with heavy alchemical rockets as an upgrade, but keeps the same 245 point cost, so that one is generally buffed as well compared to what it used to be. A new entry, and a very exciting one, is that Matsumoto generator ship found here. I was doubting, I wasn't quite sure when I was discussing the support battle fleet for the Japanese, but yeah, this is the one. It was in the ORBAT, and from the looks of it, this looks like an alternative build to the Hachiman assault carrier. And this is actually a generator ship, so the Empire is getting access to those as well, which makes for, not mistaken, the third generator ship found in the game, although the fourth can be argued if you count Markov's Prometheus for the Commonwealth. That being said though, it's not just a generator ship, you're also getting that very funky hyper beam lens cannon that I've discussed just quite a bit at the start of the video, and it comes with the Haroku, yeah, I'm saying that correct, the Haroku generator array, allowing Mass 2 models within 7 inch of this model to be equipped with the same generator as this model, and it gets a list of 3 different generators from the following list: Atomic, Fury, Magnetic, Repulsion, Shield or Shroud generator. Bit of a shame, I have to say, that it doesn't come with an option to get the shield wall generator, because that great shield wall generator requires you to shoot through units, and if you could activate that one on this specific generator ship, would be a really fun little addition to just cross and shield units with these different shield wall generators. But I suppose you can't have everything. I suppose that would make it a very strong option. The Yangte is a command ship that is tried and tested. I mean, it's a great little addition, didn't get any more expensive. It was hit with the small nerf to spotter again, but it was also gains now from tidal surge, and given that it has the 4 Erlan Sheng bombard shooting at extreme range, this is a particularly good option, allowing you to go back and protect yourself while still peppering away at your opponent with these Erlan Shengs. It, in my book, got even better than it was before. And then, even though we got a Japanese generator ship coming in, we got a super battleship coming in from the Japanese, the most exciting new entry in my book is the Zan Madau Sky Fortress. Now, it was in the entry before, but it wasn't nearly as meaty as this entry is. Comes with insane ADV and SDV, and it's got quite a bit of hull points to go with it as well. And the most interesting part about it is it has gone up significantly in points, 545 points, but it's got so many good special rules, and also a very interesting selection of traits. It de facto has a Chinese and Korean trait, so that makes sense because Koreans, it does have an SRS capacity of 10 and 5, so I'm guessing the Koreans are there to pilot the ships, and you can fit it into a Chinese list if you so desire. However, it can also gain the Japanese trait if you want to. If you do want to do that though, you have to replace at least 1 heavy gun battery, so you're sacrificing a bit of firepower, with a Bushi Ryo Dojo for no additional point cost, meaning you're slapping some Japanese samurai on there, and then you just, gain the Japanese keyword to go with it as well. The model may replace any other heavy gun battery for a Bushi Ryo Dojo and gain a cumulative benefits for each dojo if you want to pay plus 5 points per model. Now, it can be a bit of a meme, I suppose, to just replace all of those heavy gun batteries with the dojos. Then you get something that has a redunculous fray of 32. But let's be honest, this thing has the lumbering rule down below here. That lumbering rule limits it to a drift of 3 inch. And you're only moving at a speed of 4. I mean, it is of course incredibly funny to be completely swarmed by angry Japanese samurai when it does happen, but how scary is a ship that is made for close combat that moves towards you at 7 inch? But can be quite fun. And it does have an interesting way of moving, regardless if you take the dojos or not, and that is the decentralized systems. At the start of each round, this unit may declare it changes its heading. So the round starts and you can then go like, I would like it to have its front aimed to whatever side you want really. Nominate which one of the side of each model in the unit is now the front. You may either rotate the model to its new facing or simply nominate a specific side of the model if you don't feel like turning it too much. And that can be incredibly important because it has got 2 alchemical cluster bombs noted here, which can only fire in the aft. So it's not really a big deal. You can just sort of swap it over and just, you know, start using the alchemical cluster bombs in a smart way. Although, be mindful, you have to do this at the start of each round, so you're going to have to think a bit and preemptively think about what your opponent is going to do to use this decentralized system, because it is going to affect your drift movement coming up as well. It's not like it's got paddle wheels to just give you immense turning flexibility. Other than that, Flag Barrage 12 is quite significant, so you can try to shoot down opposing SRS if you want. It comes with priority signals. We've discussed this earlier. It means that you get even more reliable Valor effects than before, because you can just have a second go at it. This one is incredibly strong. It is the Shield Generator Tower. This unit is equipped with a shield generator, may not be upgraded or replaced. However, the tower enables the unit shield generator to not be limited to a maximum of 3 dice, and just uses the unit's actual mass, which is the significant value of 5. So your dice going down by 5, on top of defensive stats that are, you know, not the worst in the world. Armor 7 and Citadel 15 is nothing to sneeze at, and you're still having to deal with an aerial unit and all of the range increases that it brings with it. This is a significantly tough cookie to crack. And of course, it's got SRS tokens, so it can do all the SRS token thingies, like Mind Clearance and SRS Recon Flight. All in all, this is an incredibly exciting option. It's not just an exciting model that I'm really looking forward to, it's something that I read the rules to and go like, yes, I kind of want to field this thing. This looks like it's a hoot to play with. So yeah, big thumbs up. Now, when it comes to the meat and potatoes of the fleet, I am going to try and keep it brief. He says, as the video runs multiple minutes already. But yeah, if you do have any specific questions about any unit entries that you feel like I've sort of glossed over, feel free to sound off in the comments below, because I'm happy to answer all of your questions you have with them. Yeah, I'm just going to go over the things that really have changed. This first one, for instance, the Barangao battle platform, is something we've seen quite a lot of before. You can tailor it a bit, but it's very similar to the entries we've seen in other ORBATs, so I'm not really going to go over them that much, although you're still allowed to ask, of course. The Dao light cruiser was changed in a slight way only. It got tweaked a bit for the ADV and SDV, and it now has the option to shoot the alchemical rockets. So again, nothing earth-shattering for the Dao light cruiser in this case. The Gong Destroyer did go up a bit, but you know, that was to be expected. It was one of the strongest entries that they have. They now have Pack Hunter as well. This rule applies while the unit has 3 or more models. The unit gains an additional +1 action die to a single attack or assault action dice pool for each model in the unit. So Pack Hunter has been changed. You no longer have to do any awkward distributions. If you've got a unit of 6 and you're just all firing at the same time for 1 attack, why wouldn't you? They've got alchemical rockets to stack up. Then you would get an extra attack per model, so you just get 6 extra dice on that one. Makes it better at just stacking everything together, and makes it slightly less awkward to having to split 2 different attacks in 3s and 3s to maximize your attacks. So all's good, despite little point increase. The Hokkaido heavy cruiser is one that I sort of regret not building yet for my own personal fleet. It's now 125 points, which is quite okay for a heavy cruiser. I mean, it's still an Armor 7 Citadel 13 ship, which is quite heavy, and it's got Flag Barrage 2 as a slight little extra thing to it. So the Japanese are able to shoot down opposing ships with the Hokkaido heavy cruiser, and that is a great little addition to it. The Honshu light cruiser wasn't changed all that much, the points weren't changed at all, but it now benefits from the new Pack Hunter. That does mean now that if you want to field any Honshu light cruisers, that you do have to go for a full squadron of 3 of them before Pack Hunter can even kick in. So that's a small little thing to keep into account if you're building any Japanese Honshu light cruisers. Take 3 or go for a more interesting option, which we'll be discussing in a bit. The Ishikawa Strike cruiser hasn't really changed all that much. It's now the one with the single heavy gun battery, does put down mines and has moon pool, so you know, interesting choice if you want it, with the same small tweak to ADV and SDV. The Kyang was bumped up slightly in points cost with the same ADV and SDV adjustment, and now benefiting from tidal surge as well. So Kyang, bit of a slap on the wrist as a very effective cruiser, but it's still a very effective cruiser, so nothing wrong there. The Kanagawa Heavy Monitor is by far the most interesting change that they've made so far. If you have to decide on what you want to build, you know, we've just talked about the Honshu. That one wasn't really one that piqued my interest. This one is 90 points, so that's a lot for a monitor class, let's be honest. But if you looked at what they've changed, this thing is now packing heavy broadsides and heavy torpedo salvos on it. Suddenly, that 90 points isn't that big of a deal anymore. And it also, well, it still comes with maritime patrol, so if you're trying to target different submarines, this one can really do it now, especially with those heavy broadsides. It's one of those entries. I still got a box tucked away somewhere of the frontline squadrons for the Japanese. I'm holding off on building it until I see what's going to be provided with all of these new Japanese things. But this one is 100% on my radar as the possible next one. This one, along with the heavy cruiser allowing you for flag barrage, are the 2 biggest changes, I think, to that frontline set. The Kyoto fast frigate wasn't changed at all, so I'm not really going to go into that one. And the Maguian offshore support platform now has 2 gun batteries that you can replace with a corrosive mortar if you want to. And you know, this sort of smaller platform gives you advanced repair facilities in your force if you want to. If you want the more firepower heavy one, it's the Malandok war platform that comes with it. The war platforms, I've not discussed them all that much. They come with 3 heavy gun batteries, as you can see. Oddly enough, I would be pointing the aft at my opponent when I was deploying them, and keeping the front towards my own lines. As weird as that may sound, but that is pretty much what this weapon loadout tells me to do. You can still swap out the heavy gun batteries with heavy alchemical rockets if you want, for more of that alchemical fun. And yeah, you're mostly taking it for the heavy escort rule that comes along with it, giving you even more defense dice as well. Now the fun thing is, it's a new plastic kit that I personally have yet to receive. I mean, I haven't received one as an early review sample or anything along those lines, but it seems like one hell of a fun kit to work with. Any model in the unit may take any combination of up to 4 of the following weapons. You can slap some extra gun batteries on there, you can slap some extra alchemical rockets on there that you might have left. I don't think there is a turret option yet, at least I can't think of one, where you have this one as a separate option. But it's future proof, so that's a fun thing. And it can also have corrosive mortars on there if you're willing to pay 13 points for that one. Up to 2 of those weapons can have the same fire arc as each of the heavy gun batteries, so you can actually just slap them on, the 2 of them pointing towards the rear, and have them with that same fire arc to sort of support that one. And if you want to, you can still include a Great Wall generator, or either an interface, although I don't see the point to the interface generator all that much, for a hefty plus 25 points. The one danger you have with this platform, I think, is that you overdo it, because at the end of the day, it's still, quote-unquote, only an Armor 5 Citadel 12 platform with, in total, 12 hull points. So if you're overdoing it, you are creating a platform costing well over 200 points, with the toughness of a slightly beefed up cruiser, but, well, not even a cruiser really at Armor 5, and I think it gets a bit too expensive to do so. But yeah, I do want to try that one out when that kit comes. This is a side note, but if that one is released, I'm thinking of just getting 5 or 6 of them just to spruce up my table with all kinds of terrains, because I just want to mount them on all of the different islands I have to create something that really just screams dystopian age. Next up we have the Meru Heavy Cruiser. Slight tap on the wrists because it was really good, and it's still really good. At 132 points, that's not a real points cost though, because if you're taking a Meru, you want to be upgrading the heavy gun batteries with alchemical heavy rockets, so the real cost is actually 138 points for a Meru. But worth every penny, because at Armor 7 Citadel 12 with paddle wheels, the aft weapon can always be used. I mean, you'd have to really find yourself in a very awkward position not to be able to do so, and with alchemical conflagration. And now the option of a tidal surge as well. You can make something that's incredibly strong. I mean, you can just deploy it sideways in your own line, just drift it back 2 inch, and have something that has a toughness that is just insanely hard to crack. And then you have a unit that can function as a midfield brawler and a long-range artillery piece, or can even just swap between those 2 roles. I mean, that point cost of a 138 points is justified in so many different ways. The Miyagi Scout Monitor is one that I've always found somewhat hard to justify. I mean, it comes in at 120 points. Yes, it does get 2 SRS, meaning that if you take a full unit of 3 of them, you will have something that is effectively 1.5 carrier on top of the heavy gun batteries and the heavy broadsides that it brings. I mean, that's not a small buff, the fact that it gets the heavy broadsides on top of what it already does. And it's a good little ship, but I think that the competition it just has in that very strong Japanese lineup. I mean, you're getting that heavy cruiser for 5 points more. It's a tough one, really. If you want to have the SRS tokens these days, that is a bit of a spoiler for what's coming up, there's a way more interesting option when we're talking about the different Sky Fortresses coming up that can also be given the Japanese trait if you so desire. In a similar vein, the Okinawa Recon cruiser is that cruiser that comes with an SRS capacity of 2, doesn't lose that if it becomes crippled, luckily. So you did have some access to SRS tokens for the Japanese, but in this new ORBAT it's not quite as needed as it was before. So I'm finding myself, you know, looking at that 140 points cost and going like, aren't you just better off getting the Flag Barrage heavy cruiser that we've discussed, or the new entry with the Reno subs as well, if you do want to send out SRS tokens on offensive attacks. I mean, it is still handy if you're wanting to use the spotter rule, for instance, but that one is mostly found on Chinese ships. So if you're using that full spectrum of all the different nations, this one can still be handy. but I'm afraid that it is up against some very stiff competition from some of the new entries these days. The Osaka line cruiser went up significantly in points. I mean, I think it got a bump up by another 8 points before, compared to before. And you know what? I actually think this... I saw the Newfoundland from the Canadians going up a bit in points as well with the front mounted weapons. This one brings it more in line with what other nations are paying for frontline cruisers that have full forward firing capabilities. But it's not all bad, because it's not just a slap on the wrist with an increase in points cost. It does come with a focused gunnery rule now, so you're actually getting some more firepower out of your Osaka line cruisers. And I think this is a good call, because it creates a bit of difference between the very efficient Kyang cruisers found for the Chinese and these Osaka line cruisers now as well. The Japanese are getting some more love, this time with a Sakata heavy destroyer coming up, which is a double regular gun battery, albeit with aft-mounted gun battery in this one as well, and a light torpedo salvo aimed at the front. It gets the Giant Slayer rule, so you're allowed to re-roll blanks if the initial target is mass 3 or more, but I do have to say, at 44 points a pop, sounds like it's on the expensive end of the scale if you compare it to some other nations. I mean, if you compare this one to the Excalibur, for instance, that one gets the full torpedo salvo for a similar points cost. And yeah, it's not a bad entry by any stretch of the imagination, don't get me wrong. It's just, it gets a bit outclassed, I think, by some of the other destroyer options that you can find within the same ORBAT, being the Gong destroyer, but also when looking at other ORBATs as well. But yeah, it's a first start. It hasn't been released yet. It's up for play testing, so make sure that you do and send feedback to Warcradle if you do so. The Shanghai frigate is now also benefiting from the new Pack Hunter rule. Comes in at 60 points for 2 of them, and it can include another 6 additional models at a cost of plus 30 points per model, and that really brings it back into the game, because you can have a unit of 8 of them firing 8 of those alchemical rockets with Pack Hunter. That is going to hurt, especially when you're looking at what the new rules do. And if you want to get really nasty, you can just replace all of the alchemical rockets with corrosive mortars for plus 2 points per weapon. They'll clock in at 32 points then, but seeing how good the support values are on those corrosive mortars, and that you won't be bumping up against the air defense value of your target, I think this can be a very interesting option for the Shanghai frigate. I just hope that you can get your hands on enough of those corrosive mortar tokens to drop on top of those rocket batteries, but that's a different thing altogether. And if we're looking at the Wusong Monitor, which is the smallest cruiser you can build with the Chinese, it now clocks in at 75 points, but it comes with that very nifty Flag Barrage 3 rule. And so, like I said, if you wanted to build some of the smaller entries from the cruisers in this Empire force, Warcradle really did a good job of making those more, appealing. You'd really want to include a unit of 3 of these simply to get another Flag Barrage 9 in there. So yeah, good job. The only one, and I'm really not that impressed by, honestly, to the point where I'm actually regretting building that one, is a Yamaguchi attack cruiser. Yes, it comes with Moonpool. Yes, it does have the focused gunnery, but at 130 points it used to come with its own Cheetah submersible token, and these days you even have to pay for that one in addition as well, and you're already paying additional points for Cheetah submersibles to make them slightly more durable compared to normal escorts, and I just see slightly reduced value into that Moonpool ship, especially if it's clocking in at 130, which is 5 points more. You have to keep in the back of your head as the heavy cruiser option. It does have the similar heavy cruiser stats though, but now that that one gets the flag barrage, I'm thinking the flag barrage has my my preference. I mean, I'll try it again, but yeah, it has lost some of its appeal compared to where it came from. When it comes to the submerged unit, there is a lot of fun in here if you're somebody who feels Japanese. If you're sticking to a purely Chinese force, this isn't really the segment for you, but you'd be wrong though, because there's some very fun stuff in there. The first one being a fairly basic hunter submarine, and I'm saying basic sounds derogatory, but it really isn't. I mean, it's a super strong entry at 35 points, you're getting something with a torpedo salvo at 70 points. Now, other nations have something similar to this, but few of them have submarines clocking in at Armor 5 Citadel 11, while still having the same sort of firepower, and as a small bonus, I should say, agile, because they don't really drift all that long anyway, or all that far I should say. And really strong entry, this Shubu Hunter submarine. It actually performs better than what most nations get. There's also an option to go for one of the new Mass 2 submarines, which are the, and these names are still a bit new to me, so bear with me, the Kagutsushi submersible magma caster. It comes with the magma cast generator, which is an Empire equivalent to the cryo generator found in the Commonwealth, where you can use it to make an attack, or to create some magma rocks if I'm not mistaken. At 118 points, it is slightly expensive, but you do get a heavy torpedo salvo baseline out of it, along with the magma cast generator, so it's something I'm willing to give a go. At armor 5 and 11, it's not the toughest of ships, but you know, always being shrouded without you being able to sort of knock it out with a generator shutdown is pretty nifty. This is an entry, the Kaju Ika Colossus Automata, that I frankly am not the biggest fan of. I'll just go out and say it. It comes with the 2 scalpel lancets, and I didn't see it being changed compared to the previous entry. If you're using the unexpected arrival rule, those 2 scalpel lancets are incredibly pillow-fisted. There's no other way to describe it, to do any damage to an opposing ship, and the main damage when you're arriving from unexpected arrival comes through ramming. There is a different variant called the Ofukuru Ika Colossus, and I honestly can't see a reason to take this one opposed to the other one, if I'm really honest. You do get the mines out of this one, but if you think about it, 151 points for a mine token is quite a lot. I would much rather just see them using the ramming actions and using the Ofukuru that trades the scalpel lancets for ramming weapons in there as well. The Japanese also have a new Kantai battle submarine, clocking in at 100 points. It just comes with the heavy torpedo salvo, although it gets an interesting rules interaction by having both the unexpected arrival rule, allowing it to pop up anywhere on the battlefield, along with strategic withdrawal. I do have to say though that if you've got unexpected arrival and you are constantly having to rely on a single heavy torpedo salvo, you're not exactly getting the most out of it, because you have to keep using the crippled value of your torpedoes every time you pop up, and then you disappear, and you have to pop up again with the crippled value. You might not get the most out of it. However, if I don't know what the new missions are going to be looking like that they plan to release, and once those arrive, maybe a unit like this is absolutely invaluable, that can just reposition itself from one space to the next whilst still being relatively cheap. I mean, 100 points is not a lot for a unit that has these capabilities, and if there's more things where you have to capture objectives and positions, I can see this one being one that you want to keep an eye out for. The other ones are the Karo Modako submersible strike ship. These Japanese names, they're still quite new to me. It comes in at 105 points, so you're paying 5 points less. You actually lose the heavy torpedo salvo, but you get this very fun little, I think they're going to be the tentacle submarines, although the slightly less hard-hitting version, of course, compared to the Ika creatures, with the terror from below and you being allowed to drag in other ships, mind you, of equal mass or less, so this one can only go after enemy cruisers. And as a small thing, I do want to point out one thing. That was the same for all Japanese cruisers. They all have quite low air defense values. Now, it's not a problem for aerial weapons, they're allowed to use them anyway. But you do have to be careful when it comes to enemy SRS. Now, this is a small tip for people fighting these Japanese when they come out. SRS really do seem like the best way to tackle them. First of all, you don't really have to be afraid of your SRS tokens being gunned down with that low one of an ADV, and you can even attempt torpedo runs against them, because their SDV is nothing to write home about either. And then you're taking away their biggest source of defense, because torpedo attacks just straight up ignore the shrouded rule that they'll have from being submerged. So this is just a small little deviation into how to counter these submarines. I think SRS are going to be golden against them. Now, another submarine following a very similar pattern is the Misuchi submersible exosub carrier, and this is the one that really caught my attention. At 115 points, you're still getting the heavy torpedo salvo to rain some torpedoes from afar, and you get the Rin exosub, albeit only at a 2 and a 1 variant. It's not really the end of the world though, because for a carrier, which it is, it still has the majority of the hull points distributed towards the battle ready state. So that is a very strong thing. And I mean, these exosubs at 40-inch range do lend some incredibly good long-range firepower, especially when coupled with the heavy torpedo salvos to your Japanese force. So if I'm getting my hands on some of these plastic sprues, I personally think this is going to be the variant that I'll be building first. In a similar vein, I have not yet received my Ika box. There was a bit of a mix-up and they were not included when I ordered my Sturginium Skies box, but when I do, I am definitely opting for the Ofukuro Ika Colossus Automata. It's cheaper, it trades in the scalpel, like I said, for scything blades, and the scything blades have got a very interesting interaction, I think. These things can pop out of the ocean and do a very nasty little ram attack with the scything blades, and you can use both of them together, should you want to, on a secondary strike. Now, the scything blades have only, quote-unquote, 6 dice in addition to your ramming attack, but they do come with a piercing rule, and you can turn that into 9 dice if you're using both scything blades in one. However, there's an argument not to do so, and that is that Shokushu rule that they have here. You automatically gain +3 to any assault dice pools or when making a ram action, or +5 if you're actually lucky enough to go up against enemy colossi. Once per activation, all models in this unit may make the following Valor effect. A single enemy model within 4 inch of the model in this unit may immediately be placed in base contact with this model, in any orientation of the attacking player's choosing, so you can just turn it around in a slightly awkward manner if you want to. It's not treated as a collision, but it is instead treating as a ramming action made by this model, and this is where you can actually use that second scything blade. So if you're planning on using this Valor effect, I would refrain from using the secondary strike ability. If you're not using that one, or you're going like, well, I really got a crappy hand of cards this round, then feel free to use both scything blades in a very efficient ramming attack. At the end of the day, this thing can get a potential +5 for moving after it popped up. It's got an unmodified hull point of 4 due to the Shokushu rule, it gains another +3 to it, bumping that up to +12, and with one scything blade that is bumped up to 18, and with two scything blades that's bumped up to 21 dice with piercing. That's going to hurt. So this is very much the entry I've got my eye on personally. Now, with the Mizuchi being a thing, I have a hard time justifying this particular entry. Clocks in at the same points as the Mizuchi, which was the exo-sub carrier, which was able to sort of launch those nifty little tokens, clocking at 10 dice. It trades that in for heavy alchemical rockets, albeit with a Skyfire rule, allowing you to reroll blanks when shooting at aerial units. I mean, it is theoretically slightly better at shooting at aerial targets. No argument there. However, sacrificing the enormous flexibility of the exo-sub for a slightly better output versus aerial weapons is not exactly something I'm massively convinced about. So if there is a next upgrade, I think this one is at a slightly awkward points cost because it puts it in direct comparison with the exo-sub carrier. Luckily, this next entry, the Umibozo submersible assault ship, doesn't fall prey to that same mistake. I mean, there is something specialized at ramming stuff with those death from below rules, allowing you to do the Shokushu attack as well. This one just comes with the much more straightforward Ryobo Prow Saw, which is a dedicated ramming attack. Still comes with terror from below. Luckily, this one only clocks in at 90 points, so you're actually getting a hefty points cost reduction as well. Also, you're also only getting a torpedo salvo out of this one, so it doesn't exactly compete with some of the other entries that we saw. This one really is the one that you want to get if you're the kind of player who just likes to go up to your enemy and just ram them into smithereens. And if you want to, you can actually get a cheap-ish submersible assault ship from the Japanese as well. Now when it comes to the aerial units, we have the Tianlong Draconic Colossus. Not a lot was changed, so I'm not really going to go in depth with them, but again, like I said earlier, if you've got some specific questions about this one, you can always ask, of course, in the comments below. There was a bit of cleaning up with the secondary strike rule with the scything blades, because technically those scything blades are mounted in the back, the aft of the model, and you can only execute a ramming attack in the front. So they cleared this up, saying this model may use this weapon in a ramming action as though it was mounted in the fore arc, which is just a small cleanup. Other than that, it pretty much remains the same, other than now it has the option getting a Great Wall generator in there as well. I'm not sure this is the ideal candidate with its lower mass of 2, but you know, it's an option, you can play around with it, and if you go like, you're completely wrong, you know, this is the best thing ever, feel free to drop a comment down below if you've tested it. I mean, with it being an aerial unit, I can see that the chances of firing through it are actually bigger, so maybe I'm completely wrong about this. However, that being said, there's few more flying options these days in the Empire list. And the more interesting options in this new ORBAT, not so much interesting because the Tianlong is a bad entry, but more interesting as in these are completely new, is the Kyang Sky Keep. Clocks in at 160 points, which is quite heavy for a Mass 2 entry. Comes with heavy alchemical rockets firing in a 360-degree arc and some alchemical cluster bombs, and these are baby versions of the Zan Madau that I've discussed earlier. They look very fun to use. You get some SRS capacity in there, 4 SRS tokens normally, so they also gain the Korean keyword because it's the Koreans piloting all those different SRS craft. However, you can still include them in any Chinese forces, because they do have that keyword, And if you wanted to, you can swap out the heavy alchemical rockets to gain the Japanese trait if you change the heavy alchemical rockets with Bushirio Dojo for no additional points cost. Now, there is a weird thing here. They're lumbering, so they come with a drift of 3 inch, which is more than their mass normally allows. So this is actually the first time that I've seen where lumbering makes your ship faster, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But you still have a ship that is moving at 7-inch speed. So if you do want to use those Japanese dojos, you're going to have a ship that slowly goes up to the midfield, launching SRS tokens, and it might be launching attacks in turn, well, maybe turn 2, but more likely turn 3, where you're going to see that happen. It's not like you're losing an awful lot of firepower in doing so, and if you want to have a bit of fun with some Japanese sky keeps, definitely feel free to do so, because it's not horrible. It also provides you with a nifty little flag barrage rule, flag barrage 4 in this case, which is great to keep your own fleet safe from enemy SRS tokens as well. And when you add all of these things together, especially now that, you know, SRS capacity for cruisers have gotten more expensive, that 160 point cost is not all that bad. You're getting quite a bit for it. I mean, with Citadel 6 and Armor 6 and Citadel 13, this is a reasonably tough little block with SRS tokens, with an option to fire, and with flag barrage. Not a bad entry at all, and definitely one that I'm looking forward to when that Sky Fortress box drops. I'm guessing this is the alternate build for it, the way more cheaper 135 point Z-Way Sky Bastion. Comes with the same heavy alchemical rockets fired in 360 degrees, bumps up that flag barrage to be flag barrage 5, which is a good thing, and also has that lumbering, bringing it up to 4-inch. And should you so desire, you can also add this one to any Japanese fleets by giving it a Japanese trait if you swap out the rocket battery for Bushirio Dojos. Not a bad thing if you want to have some additional flag barrage, because this one kicks it up to flag barrage 5. But I'm going to be honest, if I'm looking at these two entries, I'm paying the 25 points extra to give it the SRS tokens and drop down that flag barrage by a smidge. But yeah, definitely still an entry that I would consider if I'm getting my hands on multiple ones of these sets. And who knows, you might be able to magnetize them quite easily to follow one of the other. There we have it. That was another quite lengthy discussion of an ORBAT. These deep dives do tend to get very long, but I still hope that you enjoyed it and hope you learned something from it. If you did, remember, give it a thumbs up, comment on it as well, and subscribe for future content. That all helps to sort of bring this channel more into the YouTube algorithm, and I do hope to see you in the next video. Bye!